okay? We are going to record this and see if we can't post it online. So a couple of tips for the GoToMeeting. Again, this is being recorded. There's a dashboard. It looks like everybody pretty much has managed to manage it. So feel free to mute yourself. You can unmute to ask questions. We'd like to save those questions to the end. But I will encourage you, if you have questions as we go along, feel free to type them into the chat box. Doug will monitor those, and we can recap them. And you may see your neighbors or somebody asking similar questions. So I think almost everybody has already typed their name and address into the chat box. If you haven't yet, please do that. Is there anybody that's calling in only by phone? Anybody calling in only?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes, I am.
Okay, could we get your name and address?
Tammy Stewig, 97 North Circle Drive.
Anybody else?
Stephen Bonnie Fleechek, 106 Inner Drive.
Okay. I think that's it. Anybody else? Okay, thanks.
Chris?
Like I said,
Chris?
oh, I'm sorry.
Chris?
Yep.
Yeah, this is Patty Sokup, and I'm on by phone right now. 704 West
Okay.
Circle Drive.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Okay, yes, and feel free to mute yourself when except asking questions. The last thing, again, as I mentioned, please feel free to ask questions during the presentations by typing those in the chat box. And I don't think we're having any sound issues. If you are getting feedback on your end, excuse me. If you're getting any feedback on your end, make sure you don't have two audios going at the same time. Excuse me. So why are we here? Quick recap: the City Council and the Public Utilities Advisory Board adopted a capital improvements plan back in 2020, last year. Or I'm sorry, early this year. I'm sorry, I've got my years mixed up. In 2019, they adopted the capital improvements plan and identified this project for the year of 2021. Why this neighborhood? I think there's actually been discussions to have that this neighborhood would be a priority when the city resumed street and utility improvement projects, mainly because there's been a lot of water main breaks in that neighborhood, way more than is common throughout the community. There's known drainage issues. The streets are in rough shape. They weren't necessarily built to a modern standard, and of course they're older at this time. We have what we call inflow and infiltration, which is basically clear water that flows into the sanitary sewer. It has the risk of some backups, but it also just burdens the wastewater plant with a lot of extra water that doesn't need to be there. So back in February of this year, the City Council ordered the preparation of a feasibility study. And what that is, an engineering feasibility study, identifies the proposed scope of the project, what is the probable cost, and what is the proposed funding for the project. This feasibility study is actually a requirement by law under state statute 429, and it's what we refer to as the public improvement process. Real quick, what is that? Minnesota Statutes 429 is the, as I note here in the slide, is really the most effective funding tool for municipalities and local government. Basically, it allows local government, it gives them the authority to use special assessments as a funding tool to help finance a portion of public improvement projects. And where special assessments are basically set up to assign as much cost as reasonable to those properties that receive benefit from the projects. And basically that's to help reduce some of the burden on the overall community because of those that receive benefit from the project. So what is the scope of this project? Obviously, most of you are from I guess we're referring to as the Circle Drive neighborhood, North Circle Drive, East Circle Drive, West Circle Drive, Inner Drive, and Hillcrest. But in addition to that, we are looking at Hickory from West Circle up to at least 5th Street, if not all the way down to Deer Trail, as well as Rogers Drive up to the golf course. Now you'll see the different colors there. The areas that are here in yellow with a lot more drawing there is the sections of road that are proposed to be a full reconstruction. That means completely everything, utilities, streets, etc. The areas that are shown here in pink on Hickory and Rogers are being looked at as only a mill and overlay portion. And if you look at those sections of the street, they're much better condition than the rest of those areas that are in yellow. Plus the utilities, there aren't the same utility issues in those sections as well. So what's proposed in the improvements, just to kind of recap, and this isn't throughout, but I'll get into a little detail on where there's some differences. But water main improvements, so complete replacement of all the water main in the reconstruction areas. That includes water services between the mains out in the road and the property line up in the boulevard. So replacement of the water services, the service laterals that go to your home. Sanitary sewer, about 2/3 of the sanitary sewer in the Circle Drive neighborhood is old clay tile, and that all has to be replaced. There's the newer portion of the development, the western portion of the development is actually PVC and will not need to be replaced. So the clay sewers will be replaced, the services out to the property lines will be replaced. Pretty much extensively, all the storm sewer will be replaced in the reconstruction areas. With the new reconstruction projects, we also include the installation of sump pump or sump drain boxes. So basically a place where the sump pump water can be sent to and drained into the storm system. Obviously, street improvements, total reconstruction of the streets, with new curb and gutter, driveway aprons, and there is a little bit of sidewalk that is proposed in a few areas to connect to the North Side Park. I know this is kind of probably real small on a lot of screens, but just to kind of recap for the Circle Drive area, all the lines in red are what we're anticipating is all the new storm sewer. For those that maybe live over on West Circle Drive and the cul-de-sac, you may realize that there's storm sewer that actually dumps off of Inner Drive and goes into the back between two homes, and then it drains along the railroad, etc. And it's not something that's easily sustainable. It's created problems over the years. It all ultimately ends in the same place. The reason they probably did it way back when was it was the shortcut. We're proposing to replace that, redirect that storm sewer and bring it down to North Circle Drive and into new storm sewer and send it in the same direction. With that said, I should say we've actually, our study included a stormwater study and a model of the whole drainage system and how it works with the golf course and the golf course facility and the wetlands and basins in the golf course. And we'll be in communication with the golf course regarding potential pond expansions and things like that. So all of this is intertwined, and the whole system will function better if we look at that all as one piece. So again, in replacement of the storm sewer, it'll likely include some pond construction or pond expansion up in the golf course. When I mentioned the sanitary sewer that needs to be replaced, it's a little hard to see, but all the lines that are here in green, so on East Circle Drive, North Circle Drive up to West Circle Drive, Hillcrest, and the east half of Inner Drive. That's all clay sanitary sewer, and that all needs to be replaced. The western portion, the cul-de-sac, that's all newer. That's all PVC sanitary sewer. It's been televised. It's in good shape. Nothing has to be done with that. The water main, however, throughout the whole neighborhood does need to be replaced. Again, it's an excessive amount of water main breaks that have occurred in the area. We're going to build a new street on top, and the last thing we want to happen is continued water main breaks. So that'll be throughout. A couple of things I want to highlight too in the Circle Drive neighborhood. This intersection of West Circle Drive and North Circle Drive, it's a big, massive sea of blacktop. We never would build something like that today. It'll be reduced down to a normal geometric intersection that'll eliminate a lot of blacktop. Probably you get a lot of fast cars turning because they can. So that will be modified. And again, those areas will be put back to turf. The corner of North Circle Drive and East Circle Drive has kind of a bulge bump out, kind of a half cul-de-sac. We would propose to revise that as well. And the reason is it just becomes a snow plowing challenge and adds more maintenance to city staff. Last item, and I don't have really a detail of what's proposed. I see my screen is there we go. Oh. I'm gonna see I can see what you're seeing on the screen. And I think what you're seeing is a slide off. Oh, that's great. If any of this sounded a little odd, it's why it sounded like I was ahead of myself. It seems like what you're seeing is a screen difference from what I am. So what I'm okay, let me see what's happening here. My apologies. Okay, so you're all seeing now a slide that says Hickory Avenue and First Street. That's right, Doug? Okay. Yep. There seems to be a long delay. I'll try to watch what you're able to see because my slides are ahead of you. The one thing we're looking at too, we don't have a detail exactly how it's going to look, but and this probably doesn't really affect most of the folks here, but there's a lot of unnecessary traffic that goes down the gravel road of First Street. And so we are probably going to do something to make that more like a narrow drive entrance, less of a convenience for traffic to go up and down that gravel road. It's not meant to handle traffic due to the width. It's an alley. It's not meant to serve a lot of folks. So that'll be part of the design as well. Okay, next slide is Hickory Avenue. As you can see, the west half of Hickory Avenue is the proposed reconstruction. The east part and Rogers is what we're showing as a mill and overlay. The reconstruction here on Hickory Avenue will be the same as what's proposed in the Circle Drive area. Not to get into a lot of the details, but again, it's a full reconstruction, full subcut, full preparation of a road bed, way better than what's there today. If you can read this, basically we excavate down, we place geotextile fabric. There's 18 inches of sand that works with a sub drain to help get rid of sub moisture. It's also the place where the sump pump lines can go to. So on top of the 18 inches of sand is 8 inches of aggregate base and 4 inches of new bituminous. So again, a superior section, one that is more sustainable and can last longer and be easier maintained long into the future. Rogers Drive, which will pop up here in a sec, is again mill and overlay. I'm showing here the section on that. What that usually includes is they do what they call a edge mill on near the curb line, which provides a little bit of space for the new blacktop to be placed, and then basically a layer of 2-inch layer of new blacktop is laid over the top. Again, mill and overlay, pretty basic. Help strengthen the road, preserve what's there, and extend the life of that road.
Chris, I've got a question for you here.
Sure.
I believe Ed or Gene, it says, when you say east half and west half of Hickory, where is the midpoint? Where does east start and west begin?
The intersection with 2nd Street. So just west of 2nd Street. I'm sorry. I got my streets mixed up. So just west of 4th Street would begin the full reconstruction from there to the west. So at 4th Street, it would still be a mill and overlay. If you recall, back in about 2002, 2003, there was a water main looping project that was done, and that intersection was basically reconstructed at that time. And so at this point, we'd just be looking at an overlay from there to the east. Next, as soon as the slide pops up, is the total estimated cost. So total estimated cost of this project, and this is still preliminary. We're in the process of, again, still evaluating some of our cost estimates. And there are some things here that are probably still not included in the cost. An example being, if we do some ponding, that cost is not in here. And as I'll show you later, the only thing it'll affect is funding from the stormwater fund, and not directly if assessments are made. So as you can see in the numbers here, and I'll read them off roughly if you can't read them out loud or read them on your screen. Street improvements are estimated a little over 3.3 million, or 69%. Storm sewer improvements are estimated at about 438,000, or 9% of the cost of the project. Sanitary sewer improvements, 340,000, or about 7% of the project. And water system improvements, about 719,000, or about 14.8% of the project. Total estimated cost of the project is about 4.8, almost 4.9 million. And again, there may be some items that aren't included here as we finalize what we're looking at for stormwater ponding and things like that. So how are local projects funded? Projects like this, as soon as my screen pops up. General levy, which is citywide property taxes, that's one way. Fees from like the sewer utility, the water utility, the stormwater utility. Those enterprise funds, the money that they collect from monthly charges, has helped to fund those improvements. In fact, a good share of that's coming from those funds. Assessments to the benefiting properties. Some cases, sometimes there's outside funding, but for a project like this, where it's located, there really isn't options for any other outside funding. County, state, or federal, nothing like that. And then really what I always say is some fair and reasonable balance of all of the above. So when it pops, okay, yeah, already went through to, so the proposed funding as it's laid out right now in the feasibility study, sanitary sewer utility fund, about 297,000, or 6% of the cost of the project. The water utility fund, about 592,000, or about 12% of the cost of the project. The stormwater utility fund, 438,000, or about 9% of the cost of the project. And then assessments for street, water service, and sanitary sewer service, about 970, almost 980,000, or about 20% of the cost of the project. The balance of the project would be from what would be the general debt service, which basically is through the general fund, is just under 2.6 million, or about almost 53% of the cost of the project. was be through the general debt service. Slide I always like to do is just a comparison. So citywide contribution is all those funding sources and the general debt service, about 3.9 million, or almost 80% of the cost of the project. And then the neighborhood contribution, which is the assessments, about 980,000, or about 20% of the cost of the project, which brings us to that just under 4.9 million for the total cost. Talk a little bit about assessment policy and methodology. I should point out the City Council and Public Works Advisory Board developed an assessment policy back in 2013, 2014, prior to the Fifth Street project. The assessment policy was adopted by ordinance, and it was written and basically done so that every assessments on future projects would be consistent, uniform, fair, and equitable from project to project. The baseline is that all single-family residential properties are treated the same because everybody's part of a street system. The residential unit is basically our baseline, and how all assessments are determined. So, and I'll get into that in a little bit so you understand what that means. If you joined on the call, could you please mute your phone? Because we have a couple of callers there. If you could mute your phone, that would be great. And then there is a separate way to assess multifamily, institutional, commercial, and industrial properties because they're often a lot larger. And I'll show you how that works as well. The other thing is the assessment rates are fixed. So what I'm telling you here tonight are the assessment rates that are intended to be assessed in the fall of next year, so about a year and a half from now. So they're not intended to change, and that basically has been how it's worked. They're a fixed rate to be, again, uniform year to year, project to project. Neighborhood to neighborhood, et cetera. And the reason being is if there's any fluctuation in the cost of the project, bids come in really good or bids come in a little higher, it doesn't affect the person being assessed. It's basically picked up by all those funds and the general debt service. So when I talked earlier about the standard residential unit as the baseline, if you can see and look at this map here, it kind of shows you an idea here of, let's say the people on the top side here are residential properties. Every property is a unit. They're assessed one unit. We also have the way we deal with corner properties is if it's a property that has an improvement on one side, they get a half a unit on that side, and if there's an improvement on the other side, they get a half a unit on that. There may be circumstances where only one street is being done this year, and the other street might be done in a future year. So that corner property may pay a half a unit on this project, and then a half a unit on another project. And ultimately, in the end, if it's both corners are done, they get a half a unit, it's one unit. So that's how the residentials are determined. Commercial properties are basically the same way, but because they're might be larger, their frontage is basically measured, their total front footage is measured, and they use the front footage rate that's equivalent to what the residential rates are. And so basically to determine that is we take the residential rate, divide by 75, which is kind of an average residential property, and come up with a front footage rate. And that gets applied across commercial, industrial, multifamily parcels, and assessed accordingly because they're typically larger parcels. When I talked about fixed rate, unit rates, these are how the rates are. So for the full reconstruction street assessment proposed, I apologize, I didn't edit the title here, proposed for 2021 is $7,027.80 per unit. So your single family residential property for a street full reconstruction would pay $7,027.80. Those on the corner would pay half if only one side was being done. For the mill and overlay, and we don't have too many residentials, but that assessment for the mill and overlay would be $1,621.80 per residential unit, single-family residential unit. And again, those are the baseline for the multifamily and industrial, et cetera, that are calculated. The multifamily commercial properties assessed at $25.95 per front foot. And then we have a townhome property up by the golf course, and those end up getting divided up by each of the unit, and in the end they only pay $497 for their mill and overlay portion of the project. Residential domestic water service replacement. So for all the properties that are having full water main reconstruction, the policy is to assess the water service lateral from the main to the property line. The proposed assessment amount is $1,297.44 per unit. Domestic sanitary sewer, $1,081.20 per unit. So for those that maybe want to do the quick math, and this is probably pretty typical for most of the properties up in the Circle Drive neighborhood, for those that have a street assessment, water assessment, and sanitary sewer service assessment, the full amount to be assessed would be $9,406. For those there's some properties that will not have sewer service assessments because the sewer mains and services are PVC, so it'll only be water service and street. The amount would be $8,325 per unit. Talk a little bit of, it's jumped screens on me. Oh, there we go again. My apologies. There's a delay here. So it'll pop up here in a sec. So to talk a little bit about the assessment process, where is that darn slide? So anyway, the assessment process.
We're seeing the assessment process now, Chris.
Pardon? Okay.
We're seeing that slide now.
Okay. Yeah, I must have a delay on there. There we go. Okay. So basically, the way the assessment process works, if you've never been through it, again, I should point out that the assessments and assessment hearing will not take place for about another year. It'll actually be probably about February of next year. So consideration by the City Council in February of 2021. The way the assessment policy is written, a property that's assessed has until October 31st of 2021 to pay the assessment if they would like to pay it up front, or they can be, the assessments can be levied to the county and payable over with the property taxes over a 15-year period, where the first payment would be due in 2022. So you're not entitled to, or you're not required to make payment of the assessment after the assessment hearing. And if you do want to pay for it, you have until October 31st of that year, so that'd be next year. Or you can let it roll over to your property tax payable to the county beginning in 2022 for a 15-year period. Interest rates on assessments are based on the bond rate that the city would get when the city sells bonds. We don't know what that'll be almost a year from now, but inevitably, I would imagine they're going to still be good based on where interest rates are now. There is options for deferred assessments on homesteaded property. Again, we can get into a lot more details at that time, and all that means is if somebody is retired by disability, or financially unable to pay, they can apply for a deferment. It doesn't make the assessment go away. The assessment's still there. It still accrues interest. It's still payable when the property changes hands or something changes with the property. But it just allows a person to not have to make payment if that would be determined a hardship. Proposed schedule. I'll kind of go down through this real quick. I'm not sure how well you can read them if you have small screens, but this is kind of where we're at. Again, the feasibility study was ordered in February of this year. We're here tonight at the neighborhood meeting. We're anticipating this to go before the city council on June 1 at a special hearing, a special meeting. If everything stays on schedule, we're looking at a public hearing with the city council on June 15th. Inevitably, it will be a similar format to this, Zoom or probably a Zoom meeting. After the public hearing, if the council wishes to order the project, authorize us to proceed, we will spend basically June through November preparing bidding documents, basically construction documents that can be put out to bid. We'll come back to the city council in December to approve plans. At that point, that's when they also will call for the preparation of the assessment roll, advertisement for bids in January. January would be the time when you would get notice of your proposed assessment. Again, it should be the numbers that we've presented here tonight. We typically will try to hold what we call a neighborhood plan review open house. So again, there's a lot more back and forth and a lot more communication before this goes to a project. Bid opening tentatively scheduled for February of 2021. Assessment hearing in February of 2021. Award of bids in February of 2021, and then construction would occur during the 2021 construction season. Interest-free deadline for assessments would be October 31st of 2021, as I noted, and then the project would be substantially complete by the end of the 2021 construction season, but typically we come back in the following year and place the final lift of blacktop and that take care of any warranty and punch list items and things like that. So with that, I'm sure there's questions. I don't know if you've got questions, feel free to turn on your mic and ask a question, or if you'd like, feel free to type it in on the chat box. One question I know that it came up, and I'm going to go to a different slide, was access. I'm sure there's questions about, how are we going to get in and out of the neighborhood? Sorry, I've got all these darn slides up here. So obviously those are a lot of fine details that we haven't necessarily gotten into specifics. Those are things that get written into the contract, but just generally speaking, take the Circle Drive neighborhood. Construction will definitely occur down in the cul-de-sac. Construction always has to occur down on the downstream end of the sanitary sewer, the downstream end of the storm sewer. So it'll start down in that end. Contractor still needs to have access. They need to maintain reasonable access to the neighborhood. I would imagine that they would probably do the cul-de-sac and probably start up West Circle Drive. And when that happens, then people would be able to, that live in that area would be able to access maybe from Inner Drive, from Hillcrest, from North Circle up to a point. And depending on what type of work's going on, folks may need to, walk a short distance to their home during certain times of construction. Certainly during the active time when the trenches open up, nobody's going to get to their house. If there's people with special needs, we obviously will be asking those questions. And if there's people that have special needs, that need access, arrangements will be made. As part different parts of the project become buttoned up, they will become the access points for other areas that start to go under construction. So that, generally speaking, again, the contractor still has to be able to get in and out with their equipment as well. So. Other questions?
Hi, Chris. This is Tom Gilhausen. Just a question regarding trees. I know I've got a couple trees that are pretty close to the street. And once this excavation is done, going through, I know a lot of the roots are going to get tore out. So I'm just wondering, are there plans to remove some of these trees? Because I guess my concern would be if the roots are all cut off on one side of the tree, it now weakens the tree and it's probably going to die anyhow. So will they be removing some of these trees?
The answer is yes, and we have not gone through and evaluated specifically. And I'm not picking on Inner Drive here for any reason, but I just brought in the street view here. If we have a lot of trees that are real close to the curb, there's probably a good chance they're going to be taken out. Number one, because for that exact reason, the root damage. Also, keep in mind, we're building this road for the next half a century plus. And those roots are going to have wreak havoc on a new street. And so we will go through and evaluate it. I know this is an older neighborhood with a lot of older trees, and especially if they're ash trees that are close to the curb and things like that, we'd probably be looking at taking those. I know Public Works would prefer not to have any trees at all in the public right of way. So that's basically about 15 feet behind the curb would be stuff that we would be looking at and evaluating whether it should be removed. And I'm not a big fan of taking out trees. So we don't just blatantly go through and plow everything down, but we take a professional look at it and determine what makes sense for the long term of the street and utilities and other things in the neighborhood.
The next question to Chris, unless there's a follow-up, is will Hickory be done following the work in the Circle Drive area? I'm assuming as far as phasing.
Yeah, well, yeah, that'll be something we'll evaluate as well. Obviously, Hickory is going to be key to access to the neighborhood, so the contractor would have to be strategic on how they deal with it. I could see them maybe, if they're working on West Circle Drive, they might build West Circle Drive out to 2nd Street. So at least they have 2nd Street as a second access. Once they need to start on the rest of it, then they've got access now. Access may come in from the west or the east. Again, we need to be able to flip-flop and strategically be able to use 2nd or 3rd to get into the neighborhood.
Next question is, when it comes to funding, is there any consideration of actual water usage? Example, one family average use is 5,000 gallons a month. Another family uses 2,000 gallons a month.
No, and again, so the assessment for the water main improvements are funded from the water utility fund itself. The only portion that's assessed is the service lateral from the main to the house, and that is not dependent on. I mean, everybody is a user, and everybody contributes to that fund. But the water service is considered actually owned by the property owner. So obviously, the bigger user, when it comes to water utility payments, that's obviously those fluctuate by the user themselves. But the actual pipe to go in the ground is indiscriminate. It costs the same no matter which house or which property it goes to. Sidewalk plan. I should point out a couple things here. Let me see if I can bring up a different slide here. Good. Okay, this is overall picture of the neighborhood. So the sidewalk that we are looking at, including with the project, I didn't mention this before, but Hickory Avenue is actually fairly wide. It's wider than we'd build a street like that today. We're actually proposing to narrow it a little bit from the north side to bring the north side a little closer to the middle of the road. And that provides a little bit more room for placing a sidewalk along the north side of Hickory up to Rogers, and then from Rogers up to at this point we've decided to terminate it at basically the parking lot for the city park. There's some intended improvements for the park, and we wanted to make sure that we didn't go beyond that point, because that'll also include some trail and sidewalk work at that time. But basically to provide access, mostly really what the sidewalk does is provides access more than anything for the folks, some of the folks in the Circle Drive neighborhood, but also properties to the south, down on 2nd and 3rd and 4th. We are also proposing, if anybody's familiar with this spot, on East Circle Drive at Inner Drive, there's actually, it's platted right-of-way, pedestrian right-of-way through there. It's not been improved. We'd like to actually look at constructing a sidewalk from there into the park as well, so it becomes kind of a neighborhood access to the park as well. So if anybody's familiar with that area, I mean, it's between two homes, but it is actually platted pedestrian way, or a right-of-way through there. There was a question about the blacktop. So the first layer of typically what we do in a full reconstruction, when there's utility improvements that take place, is the roadway gets completed and the first layer of blacktop goes down. So the first 2.5 inches goes down. And then usually we come back the following year and put the last finish coat down. The reason we do that is just in case there may be some minor settlement that occurs over the winter. If it does occur, if something like that occurs, it usually occurs in that first season. Maybe there's some warranty or punch work that has to be done, something corrective that maybe has to be done, and it's easier to open up a section in the base course, patch it, and then when you're all done, do that final lift of a wear course, and so we get a better product in the end. What are the plans to handle the field tile water that comes from Northside Park over into East Circle Drive? I guess we'll need to know more information, because as I understand it, or as I observed it in the field, is that there is a berm along the back property line, and then there's a tile on the park side of that berm that drains to a storm sewer at the end of this easement, and then that storm pipe connects into the storm sewer on East Circle Drive. So if there is drainage coming off the park onto East Circle Drive, I guess into East Circle Drive, I guess we need to know more information on that. The question is, if trees are removed, will they be replaced with a project? I don't know if I can answer. I'll do a partial answer, and then I'm going to defer to Brian Heck, City Administrator. And what I'm getting at is that we did a project in 2017 there was tree removal, and trees were not replaced with the project. But what the city did is they did provide, they did purchase some trees and allowed property owners, if they wanted to plant a tree outside the right of way on their property, they were allowed to do that at that time. I don't know if that's something we look at continuing. And Brian, are you on the line and you want to comment?
Yeah, I'm here. So the reason why we didn't do trees in 2017 is that the neighborhood where we were doing the trees really didn't want the trees. They kind of came out and said, no, we're good without trees. After all the trees were gone, several neighbors came back and said, well, we'd like to have trees back. And so that's when we did select a specific, we had a range of trees that residents could pick, and then we acquired the trees and they were responsible for planting and maintaining them. I don't know, I think what I would rather do is see how many trees come down and then work with the residents on a tree replacement plan. We do know that we don't want to put trees too close to the right of way, and we don't want to put them too close to the sanitary sewer lines because of the root issue. But I also know that a neighborhood without trees isn't very attractive. So I think we have to plan on putting some trees back, and it's just a matter of how we do that.
Okay. So the question or comment was 2 trees were included with the 5th Street project, and that project, I should point out, had different funding source. That was a county project, and the county actually covered those tree replacements, and that was pretty extensive, and they did allow them in the boulevard, which really city and public works do not want to allow trees in the boulevard, in the public right of way. So that was kind of more of an exception than the rule. Yep.
Yeah, so I think the other criteria for that is that 5th Street project also had to meet state aid construction because it was a state aid project.
Yes. So, yep. Okay, there's a question about damaged driveways. I'm not sure if I'm following the question. I'll tell you what happens on a project like this. Typically, during a full reconstruction of the street, it does require us to usually remove about 10 to even as much as 15 feet of the driveway and replace it so that it can match the street. And so there's typically an apron that gets reconstructed, and then the driveway matched in and restored back to the existing driveway. Does that answer the question? Okay. Other questions?
Chris, I have a comment. Are any of the streets within this project area other than Hickory going to be considered to be narrowed?
Oh, yeah, good question. Thanks. Yes. So most of the streets are going to be about the same width, with the exception of, I think there's a portion of, and Doug or Dominic, you can probably chime in, your memory's better than mine, but I think a portion of West Circle and the western part of North Circle and the western part of Inner Drive are wider. They're too wide.
That's
they're
correct.
wide. They're wider than need to be for a neighborhood like this. I think streets like East Circle are all at about 30 feet, and that's really the width we're looking to stick with in this neighborhood. So that everything's consistent. 30-foot wide street in a neighborhood like this is a nice standard width. Works well. It doesn't have to be too wide. keeps traffic a little calmer, things like that. Still accommodates parking. If two cars are parked on the same side, people are going to have to slow down, and they might pass at the same time, or they might take turns. Just depends on the driver. Question: will the street on East Circle Drive be sloped enough that will allow the water to drain better? Right now there are spots, so yes. So the quick answer is yes. There's a lot of goofy things out there. Some of it may be original, some of it may be years of just evolution or whatever's happened. But again, we start with a clean slate. We do a new design. Roadway design is basically, it's all, what we do is we design that road to do the best fit we can for all the driveways. So we look at every driveway, and we don't customize it for an individual driveway, but we do the best fit. That roadway will fit all those driveways on that street. We set the road at a minimum grade, or to meet minimum grade standards, so that the road can drain. We'll add more catch basins than they're there today. We'll put them in better places than they're there today, and things will work better. Question about water service. This is a great question because I didn't hit on it. So actually, when the water main is being replaced, you can't use the water main. So what they do is they actually put in what they call a temporary water service. If you happen to maybe noticed on the 5th Street project back in 15, some blue PVC pipe is run along and connected to the water spigots on the outside of the homes. And it's fed from like a hydrants in 2 different parts of the neighborhood, while the water main in that area is pulled out, removed, and reconstructed. So you actually get water service comes in through the water spigot on the outside of your house. When that occurs, water doesn't actually go through the meter, so you won't get water charge during that period of time, but you will have water service. The only time there'll be shutdowns, and you will be notified ahead of time, is when they have to cut that line, or cut a valve in or something like that. And typically typically out of service is usually a matter of like 2 to 4 hours, and usually it's in the morning on a certain day. We don't want them doing it on 2 o'clock in the afternoon on a Friday, so it's usually kept in the midweek and things like that. Other questions?
This is Steve Fleechek. I'm at 106 Inner Drive. Can you tell if the sewer in front of my house is PVC or if it's the clay tile from the old edition? Because across the street is Sunset Edition, and where I live is Welco Edition. So is it in front of my, will I be set for the store?
Yeah. Yep.
106 Inner Drive.
Yeah, 106 Inner Drive is more than likely connected to the PVC, and therefore would not have a sanitary sewer assessment based on what we know today. Other questions? Well, I'll go ahead and end this just to get a quick reminder. If all goes well, we're anticipating completing the feasibility study, bringing it to council at the next council meeting, and there would be a public hearing on June 15th. Again, would probably be in a very similar format, and at that point, the council chooses to go forward to the project. We would begin plans and specs at that time. We will be communicating more with the neighborhood. We will probably make stuff available online on the city's website as well. So stay tuned and feel free to email us with any questions or sort of things if things come up.
Say, Chris, one comment.
Yes.
So you did say June 1st. However, due to the governor's order with regard to the bars and restaurants, the council may be having a meeting before June 1st. And if we do that, I will let you know. It would probably be a Thursday next week, but I'm going to coordinate with the mayor on that.
Okay.
And then may be able to do your project feasibility report at that point.
Okay. Otherwise, we might not. That might be a little bit of a rush, depending on what's going on. Otherwise, we might look at just bumping it to bringing the report to the council on the 15th, regular council meeting, and then we'd be at a July meeting for a public hearing.
Okay. I'll keep you posted.
Yeah, okay. Well, I thank everybody for your patience and courage to get online like this. I appreciate it, and thanks a lot.
Thanks, Chris.
Have a good night.
Thank you.